What's going on, brother?
Hey, how you doing, brother?
Listening to information out.
Yep, same here. I just got done doing a little video a little bit ago about crops.
I was watching it. Good stuff. Good stuff.
We just got to realize the unlawful conveyance of the common usage of the words and everything that they're putting before us. Like I explained in that video, when they take a absolute verb and unlawfully convey it into a noun describing a totally different verb action, we're dumbfounded. And that's all we got to do is read this stuff so we can see those inconsistencies that prove that they have no authority in that law.
That's why I talked about misappropriation.
Yes, it's misappropriation of the very words, let alone the funds that they get from using those words.
Exactly. It's all about misappropriation. So that's why now once you understand certain things and it's on the record, I'm clear. So I'm waiting on the rest of the group to come in. But I'm excited. You got me real excited. So just waiting on y'all people to show up.
Yeah, I run across a huge library that I'm going to expose tonight, and it goes right along with that diplomatic security. That's what we're going to be discussing tonight, is diplomatic security.
Hey, you got to remember this. Ready. What is that? Are you allowed? Amanda talk about some shit. He is one of his little friends. I said, I know.
Okay. Again, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us on another search for the things that are true and correct. And tonight, like I said in last night's Zoom, we're going to talk about diplomatic security. And what I did was in putting my stuff together for tonight, I ran across something else. And this is something I didn't have in my files yet. But like I said just a few minutes ago, it's one of the larger libraries I found in regards to what I'm doing with all of this research, is the internationally protected persons and fair use and peace treaty and just getting along, having mutual agreements. And this is the customs legislation. And what it is it got 2018 customs management indicators. There's 272 downloads. Customs management indicators, 941 downloads. Now, these are just downloads with general information that's always going to be the same. So what we're really looking for is just the most current. And that's what we see in our Cornell. Cornell is updated every 6 months, or every quarter they do a certain section of the code. So every year it's updated, And then first quarter, it does the first quarter portion of the codes. Second quarter, it does the second portion of the codes, and so on. So we just need to stay up with the current legislations and stuff. And that's why I'm trying to urge everybody to get familiar with the electronic forum. Everything is being converted to electronic form now. And when we see this electronic form, like the Cornell Law School in plain English, that's what we're looking at. And so under Chapter 22 or Title 22 of the U.S. Code, Chapter 58, we're talking about diplomatic security. And it says generally. I love this term generally. When we look at generally, it says findings and purpose. The Congress finds and declares that the United States has a crucial stake in the presence of the United States government personnel representing United States interests abroad. First thing I want to point out is United States is located in District of Columbia. Everything else outside of that 11 square mile area, they have 11 miles they can go, and that's it. Beyond that, they have to have a specified delegation of authority. And anything with that delegation of authority has to be done through diplomatic channels of notice, diplomatic channels of service. Conditions confronting United States government personnel and missions abroad are fraught with community concerns, which will continue for the foreseeable future. They admit this. It's an admittance in, on, and for their record. And the resources, if you watched my video earlier, I explained about resources. They are dependent upon resources. That means they have to have a third party in between them and the source in order to get resources. And that's the only thing they can import is resources that have been exported, and that export was done by the intermediary and not necessarily by the originator of the content. See, my intent to give out information was never as an export for commercial purposes or commercial use. This is the thing that we just saw in that plain language in their code in the video I did earlier. The resources now available to counter acts of terrorism and protect and secure United States government personnel and missions abroad. So we have to have a mutual mission to get the same protection. We have to come into agreement with them. When we show these inconsistencies, what it does is it shows that they are in fact in agreement with us and our truth in peace, which means it disposes all of their commercial, their ordinances, which are all commercial. I am ordained a prophet. And in that prophecy, I'm supposed to tell you the truth. That is, in fact, what I'm doing. Unless you can point out that I'm lying to you, I'm telling you right from the public domain where I get my information. As well as foreign officials and missions in the United States are inadequate to meet the mounting threat to such personnel and facilities. So if it's a threat to them and their facilities, and it's a threat to us in our abode, then it should also be a mutual agreement to withdraw that information from that system and make it classified, private. It's only reason and logic then. So we go to the next one and we talk about diplomatic security service. We're going to each do each other a service. My service is the truth of knowledge and information and where to find it in source. Now you don't need the intermediary to source it for you as a resource. Now you get the actual true position, the true place where it comes from for you to then act upon it to convey it to a verb. Think. The Secretary of State, U.S. Department of State, may establish a diplomatic security service which shall perform such functions as the Secretary may determine. As we just saw, we're going to come into agreement and give them the adequate information to meet the mounting threat to personnel and facilities. See, I'm sure they're tired of the buffoons out there trying to sue them, which is a mounting threat to their personnel and their facilities. So let's not sue them and come into mutual agreement to have that information removed and have the proper credits properly converted back to where they originally came from, the original source. That's all we're doing. The purposes of this chapter to set forth the responsibility of the Secretary of State with respect to the security of diplomatic operations in the United States and abroad. So it is an obligation of the United States for diplomatic operations in respect to security, and it's with Secretary of State responsibilities. The Secretary of State does what? They record the minutes of the meeting. Are inadequate to meet. So in the meeting, the Secretary will now put down private information classified that there is no longer a mounting threat to personnel and facilities. We are now in a mutual peace treaty. This is the effect of what we want. 48 CFR is Federal Acquisition Regulation System. This is what tells us everything they do is a contract. Omnibus Diplomatic Security and Anti-Terrorism Act. So now the acts performed are no longer terroristic. You can't go in there in terroristic fashion and threaten to sue them. You've made mistakes too. You can't claim to be perfect. You're asking questions about, well, how do I do this? And how you are proving yourself you can't perfect an instrument. How can you claim they have to be perfect in it? You both made mutual mistakes. Get rid of the internal conflict and realize your own part in it and say, okay, we made mutual mistakes. We're all sinners. He's told us that. But I have redeemed thee. I have called thee by name. You are mine. In that mutual agreement of mistakes, we agree we are both his, and therefore we both have the responsibility, having redeemed ourselves, to now redeem the land, because that's the only thing left to be redeemed. Pure and simple. That's all we're trying to do. In regards to the diplomatic security, the security instruments they operate internally all require an identification of some sort. It is a secret security clearance. We no longer acquire or require the secret security clearance. We are now classified private. No clearance. No authorization to clear any record. It doesn't exist and can't exist. Watch. This is Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System agreeing and putting out a supervision and regulation letter, interagency order, granting an exemption from customer identification program requirements for loans extended by banks and their subsidiaries to all customers to facilitate purchases of property, not loans, purchases. And remember, purchases are business opportunities. And if they have a exemption from customer identification for facilitating purchases at business opportunities, and we're not buying it, we're not purchasing, isn't there a mutual identification exemption? Aren't these supposed to be equal, uniform throughout all jurisdictions? So even if there is a jurisdictional transfer or conveyance of some sort, some form, some fashion, it is still mutual agreement. Otherwise, it would be cause for war. It is supposed to be pre-existent mutual agreement in order for commercial transactions to take place. Pure and simple. And this is assured, again, Board of Governors of Federal Reserve, Division of Supervision and Regulation, the officers in charge of supervision at each Federal Reserve Bank. This is October 9th, 2020, just not too long ago. Interagency order granting an exemption from customer identification program. Applicability. This order applies to all banking organizations supervised by the Federal Reserve that are subject to customer identification program requirements under the Bank Secrecy Act. It doesn't say anything about customers. And this is why they have to give customer identifications exemptions. It exists in all uniform throughout all jurisdictions because it only applies to those organizations that are banking and supervised by the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the National Credit Union Administration, the Office of the Comptroller Currency, which includes and is supervised by the Comptroller or the Comptroller General. Again, I love that term general because under general is where everything is specified. This is a specification, but it includes that general of the Comptroller General. That's who delegates all these authorities as comptroller of currency. Collectively, the federal banking agencies and the U.S. Department of Treasury's Financial Crime Investment Network. FinCEN, hereafter, the agencies, including all of them. So we have the United States Department of Treasury Crime Enforcement Network and the federal banking agencies, which includes the Federal Reserve and all the intermediaries between the Federal Reserve and the U.S. Department of Treasury Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, showing that these guys are the beneficiary of all the information. The agencies using under the National Credit Union Administration, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and Comptroller of Currency are the trustees, and the Federal Reserve, again, is the one that grants in this trust. Recognize the trust and the parties of the trust, and if you're not even part of the trust, then you obviously have the equal capacity of benefit from the trust if you are neither the grantor or the trustee. Period. This is trust law in the international forum, people. Oh, and real quick, let me go a little bit further because it says are issuing the attached interagency order to grant an exemption from the requirements of the customer identification program rule for loans extended by banks and their subsidiaries to customers to facilitate purchases. Effective immediately, a banking organization that provides loans to customers to facilitate purchases of property and casualty insurance policies can utilize as a transmitting utility the customer identification program exemption and should update its CIP policies and procedures accordingly. They are the accommodation party. On September 28, 2018, the agencies issued an interagency, September 28th, the CIP rule set forth in Section 326 of the USA Patriot Act in relation to anti-terrorism. And you can use this same thing in every electronic form as in regards to customer identification protection. If they're seeking commercial items and it's attached to an executive order or a state statute, it can only be implemented by contract terms and conditions. In those contract terms and conditions, they're asking for the identification of the customer. You are not a customer on a social platform. You're not performing commercially. You have the same equal right of customer identification program exemption, period. Because you're not a customer. Therefore, you're not even applicable to the customer identification program if you didn't even have an exemption. Comprehend this, people. What they're doing by requiring a customer identification or identification in any manner is creating threat, duress, and coercion, and that is, by definition, terrorism. Again, anybody rebut what I am saying and prove that I am an idiot or putting this out falsely with intent. Please do it. I do not want to look like the idiot, but I think most will agree to the plain language and concise English. Please, prove me wrong. The next one is U.S. Department of State. Like I said, Department of State diplomatic list. See, everybody's thinking about this do not detain list. It's the diplomatic list under diplomatic security. That is the utmost concern that they have. It is their protocol, Office of the Chief of Protocol. And again, I'll be posting all these links for everybody. Protocol. Now, when we talk about this Treaty of Bern, and it's located in Bern, Switzerland, that's the Constitution of the Universal Postal Union is in Bern, or excuse me, it is in Netherlands. And then the BIS, which is the Bank of International Settlements. See, we have these internal banks in each country, and then we have one international bank, and that is the Bank of International Settlements. See, everybody internally is money banking. Senate document number 43, the history of money banking. That's the conversion. You are money banking when you are using contracts and signatures. You have the right to the Bank of International Settlements, and this is in accordance to settling the land. Remember back here, this one here, Customs Administration. In general, customs procedures in Central America are harmonized by the regulation of the Central American Uniform Customs Code, as I've spoken of before, and its regulations. They are also regulated by the regulation on customs procedures for international land transport. This includes settlement, land transport and settlement, just like the law of war and peace. A lot of people like to exclude that last part. It is international land transport and settlement. It is, you either have the right to travel over the land or you have the right to settle in the land. And you can assert both. It's freedom of transit in regards to international land transport, because in transport, that's the commercial term of freedom of transit. Now you're transiting across somebody's land, but you're doing so commercially, so they get the right to reach out and grab part of that package and say, oh, I get to make a profit too. Bullshit. That's third-party intermeddling, officious intermeddling on lands that they don't even have a right to claim because they never entered it properly. So now let's go back up here. The banking department bought a building. Location is in Aschenplatz, Basel, Switzerland. So we've got Bern for the peace treaty. We've got the UPU in Netherlands. And now we've got the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland. And of course, they go by the Swiss franc. And I showed you the Armed Services Board of Contract Appeals a couple Zooms ago, the United States Civilian Board of Contract Appeals, and the Judicial Post Office's Board of Contract Appeals. Postal Service Board of Contract Appeals. These are the main players in this big game called gambling, and it's all done under contract terms and conditions which are required in order for any of them to implement statutes or executive orders when they're seeking commercial items from yourself. Then they have to be able to prove a contract. These contracts are done through clinical trials, trial registrations, and results of information that you submit. You are the one that is technically, by unknowing, exporting information for them to use against you. You, yourself, is the one that is making the contract terms and conditions by giving them that information to put in that contract. They've already got the contract formed. All they have to do is fill in the blanks. Name, number, date, and address. Quit giving them that information. It's private. Classify it. Private. The next one is protection of human subjects, institutional approval. Again, in order for them to institute those codes, statutes, rules, and regulations, you have to approve it. Your approval is your consent of giving them the information they need to institute their experiments on you as a human subject. Quit consenting. The first of the 10 points of the Nuremberg Code says specifically that the consent of the voluntary human subject is absolutely essential. And we keep telling you it's voluntary. It is. Quit trying to sue them in court. You're making mutual mistakes voluntarily. Now we're going to find out, now we're going to fix everything by creation of a record of lawful permanent resident status for person born under diplomatic status in the United States. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that birth certificate, we're going to let them know it's false, there's mistakes on it, and we're going to create a record that's more perfect. It's not going to be actually perfect, but it's called perfecting the record because we're going to make sure that everybody sees the mutual mistakes, and we're going to correct it by filling in those gaps so that it perfects the record, proving that it doesn't belong in probate, that it in fact has a living will and needs to be reclassified as private. Living will, private estate, trust matters. The next one is the standards of ethical conduct for employees of the executive branch. Administrative personnel goes right back, every last one of them. When we talk about ranch land, that's for people that are actually applying for an employee loan. When we talk about farmers, those are people that supposedly have private land that want to purchase it for the intent of fish farming and then export their product into the United States. Yet that fish farm is supposed to be in the United States. I don't get it. So we have to correct the record by letting them know the standards, even for their ethical conduct, have been misconstrued because the conduct of their standards themselves that they are conducting their administrative personnel in is wrong. The languages are all wrong. It's inconsistent, and we can point this out. That's all we got to do. The next one is loan. We've discussed this before. Loan is the provision of funds. Remember, we talked about funds. That's the money banking. You're providing the funds. The funds are the negotiable instruments known as legal tender. Everybody thinks it's the Federal Reserve notes. No, you're the one giving the paper document with the signature. That's funding it. You're providing the funds. But these are the funds, the provision of funds by the agency in exchange for your funds directly to an applicant, meaning that you apply and it applies. Everybody using those funds, whether it be your funds or their funds, applies in exchange for, get this, repayment. That's telling you that by funding it, it has been paid. That is how you pay, is by funding. It's called negotiating the instrument. It's the legal tender. You have to negotiate the instrument. That's what provides the funds, showing that it has been paid. And now they want you to repay it. That sounds like recontract. It also sounds like it's already been paid. So why does it need to be repaid? With interest and collateral to secure the payment. That's the part that's missing. You now have to place your interest in your collateral, showing that, sorry, you can't repay me. We've made mutual mistakes. Here's my interest in my collateral. Let's just everybody forgive and forget, and let's reestablish the record, remove everything, and now classify it as private. Done. Over with.
So how long does that take to do?
I'm in the process, like I said, like I explained to others earlier, the best way I can explain my process is I have established myself on the international forum with the World Wide Web. And like I've said, the Postal Service regulates that as well. So I've established myself with my own post within the Postal Service. It conducts itself fairly and peacefully. And here soon, I'm going to post my adoption of the Treaty of Berne, the Library of Congress, and various other elements. And that is going to establish that I'm operating in that same trust that I just spoke about, responsible to one another and to God, both in the military fashion of the law of war and peace as a chaplain, not a prisoner of war, according to Article 53 of the Libra Code. So it's just a matter of, I'm hoping I can get it done without having to do any actual documentation, but actual presentation of the information that they have on their record that will show that it's wrong. And though I may have been part of it, they are part of it by pushing it as a summary judgment. And therefore we need to clarify the final judgment, which is we both made mutual mistakes. So let's clear the record, clearance, clear the record, releasing everybody of their liens, and nobody has any more liability. That's in conjunction with 50 USC 4305 for full acquittance and discharge, where nobody can be sued in any court for any liability. There's no longer any liability. That is the basic essence of any peace treaty. And it all correlates just the way I explained it. And it's only through knowledge that we can express it this way, and then start at the top like I'm posing and let it trickle down itself. I shouldn't have to do any documentation, guys. I shouldn't have to. I should be able to pull my public file from the public record from the state of Iowa, the courts, and show them that on their own financial index, it's listing a last/firm as LITT instead of the actual. So somebody has misconstrued something. They made a mistake there. And I don't want to admit that the mistake is that it's actually a firm or a corporation, and they've actually been selling securities on the stock market in that name, and I'm the actual principal. I just want to clear the record. I'm not going to make any claim to it. I'm just going to let them know that it is recognized as a mistake, because 93 cases where there's a summary judgment, they claimed it was me, and it clearly shows on the record is not, because they follow up with obligor and they identify it with a number.
So do you have to go back to your home state to do that, or you can do it where you're at?
I'm doing it right from the internet. I'm going to post all of my truths on the internet. When I do an electronic communication with the county where I was born, I'm going to file that, and I'm going to let them know it is recorded, and I will post the results for the international forum without violating any private rights. So there will be certain information that I will post that will be able to validate that file, showing the communication, confirming that what I say on the international forum is going to be true. They've passed it through that electronic forum under postal regulations in trust. It is now operating in trust, and I operate both on both sides of that trust, just like they do. Therefore, we both have equal access and equal patent right to publish it in the international forum. That doesn't mean I disclose private information. I can disclose the information of the file saying that information. And so that's why I firmly believe I can just let everything start trickling down now. I can use the Swiss the Swiss Confederation and the federal chancellor by contacting the the investigator general of the International Bureau, or excuse me, director general of the International Bureau, because that's what 40 or 50 USC 4305 is. It's a directive. You're going to direct them to provide full acquittance and discharge because you reverted a receipt for full indemnification. Again, that's Title 38 of the Lieber Code. The commander, the commanding chief shall cause receipts to be issued, which will allow the spoliated owner to have indemnity. And just by that alone, I should be able to let it trickle down. That's international law. And that's all I want. I've got a receipt and I'm showing it in the electronic form. You want it on paper form? That's what I'm saying. I am giving my intent. I'm showing my intent through electronic signature to go ahead and draw that paper document up. And I will line item veto through it, and I will override it, and I will initial it, and I will contract it if that's what you really want. But remember, the variance of value would be my assessment. And it tells me in the biblical scriptures that my talent to correct that record through my knowledge and information is worth 75 pounds in gold. Pay up. That's payment right there. That's my money banking. And they don't want to do that. So I just want them to learn to be mutual and just let me alone. Let me conduct my affairs as I say, and go around correcting the records. That's all I'm doing. I'm not posing any threat to anybody. And I'm doing it from the upper level. I hope that makes sense. I don't know any other way to explain it. I don't want you signing. I quit signing 6 years ago for a reason. It places emotion on your intent. Until you actually know what the intent is, I recommend you don't sign. And you don't know the intent if the terms have been converted. Again, I urge you to go back and watch that video I did just before this Zoom. Plant will amaze you. Planting, when they define planting in their definition, it reverts to a noun known as plant, which is a place where you process eggs. What's that got to do with planting corn then? It's inconsistent. Correct the record.
Artificial insemination?
Yeah, something like that. Artificial
That's what they're planting seeds.
Yeah, artificial insemination of false information being disseminated. That's the plant. That's the egg. They're planting false information and then disseminating it. Anyway, we got 2.5 minutes, folks. Up to you. Up to you.
I got a question. Now, I'm doing mine. I was doing mine with my group. We were doing it in a book. We would put it in a book. Would you recommend it? Like, because you get an ISBN number and it upload to the Library of Congress.
Right. And I always recommend everybody make your own documented library. You guys, I don't know how many of you are familiar with me, but I have my own documented library. I copied my entire transcripts and everything. And you see all those blue bound things? I bind them just like a book. And this is public information that I got off the internet. And so when people say, well, you did all your research on the internet, you didn't go to college. Well, it's the same thing that they get from college because it's all Harvard Law University reviews and Cornell reviews, government documents, Trading with the Enemies Act. It's all on the public domain. So don't tell me I got it from the internet. The internet got it from the definitive paper form to begin with, you dummies. So I urge everybody, keep doing your research and make paper forms of it, of the stuff that's pertinent to you. We have to keep a paper library. Remember the book burnings? They might one day try to get rid of it. A minute left.
I got another question. Could you draw up like an outline? Not just how this stuff could go, just an outline, just a graph of the steps. So then somebody can follow like the steps or
Well,
instructions.
that's what I'm establishing right now through the Zooms and everything, and showing everybody I've established on the international World Wide Web. That I believe is the first step.
Okay.
Get yourself a website.